Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring a historical epic of just almost unfathomable scale. We're talking about the House of Romanov. For 304 years, this single imperial dynasty maintained an absolute iron grip on Russia, expanding it into this massive global empire. But in our explainer today, we aren't just going to look at their conquests. We're going to uncover the staggering, highly institutionalized wealth they accumulated, examine the sudden, brutal execution that completely wiped out the ruling family, and we'll even unravel the modern-day mysteries and disputes that still surround their descendants right now. It is a story of absolute power, immense fortune, and total collapse. Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly does a 300-year empire just vanish, practically overnight? To truly grasp the magnitude of this family's history, we actually need to start at the very end of their reign. We're going to drop right into the shocking climax of the dynasty's collapse before we unravel exactly how they got there. Picture this. The scene is grim. It's late on the night of July 16, 1918, in the basement of the Ipatiev House in Yekaterinburg, a town out in the Ural Mountains. Former Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children have been woken up and ordered to dress quickly by their Bolshevik captors. They're led down into this small, dark cellar, told they're just taking a photograph to quell rumors that they'd escaped, but instead, they're cornered. Suddenly, a dozen armed revolutionaries burst into the room. Section 1. A Dynasty's Bloody End. So the crucial point is just how chaotic and, frankly, botched this execution really was. The small room instantly filled with choking smoke and dust from the spray of bullets, literally blinding the shooters who ended up accidentally injuring some of their own men. But when that smoke cleared, the horrific reality set in. Several of the children were actually still alive. The bullets and subsequent bayonet stabs were being deflected. Why? Because the children had the family's diamonds and jewels sewn directly into their clothing. It was acting as makeshift armor. Ultimately, the survivors were brutally bludgeoned, and to hide the crime, the captors attempted to burn the bodies, disfigured them with acid, and then hastily interred them in unmarked pits out in the forest. The sheer brutality of their end fundamentally changed how they were viewed by history and religion. Decades later, in the year 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church officially canonized Nicholas, Alexandra, and their children as passion bearers. Now, in Orthodoxy, this is a very specific designation. It means they weren't martyred specifically for their religious beliefs, but rather they faced their violent deaths at the hands of murderers with deep faith and grace. But because those bodies were hidden in unmarked graves for so long, rumors inevitably spring up that someone had survived that basement. For decades, the myth of the surviving youngest daughter, Anastasia, absolutely captivated the world. The most famous claimant was a woman known as Anna Anderson, and her story convinced so many people across Europe and America. But in 1994, using modern DNA testing, scientists definitively proved that Anna Anderson was not Russian royalty at all. She was actually a Polish woman named Franziska Sząskowska. The myth was entirely shattered by modern science. Actually, it was modern forensics that finally laid the entire mystery to rest. The first mass grave, which held Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of their children, was secretly discovered back in 1979 in Pigs Meadow near Yekaterinburg, but it wasn't officially excavated until 1991. Then, in 2007, a second, completely separate grave was found nearby, containing the remaining 2 children, which included the heir, Alexei. And to prove their identities once and for all, scientists utilized mitochondrial DNA from modern royals. They successfully matched a DNA sample from Britain's Prince Philip to Tsarina Alexandra and the children, while DNA from the Duke of Fife was matched directly to Tsar Nicholas II. The grim puzzle was finally complete. No one had escaped. Section 2. Rise to Absolute Power. Let's move to our timeline and see how this builds. To see how they acquired such absolute authority, we start in 1598. The preceding Rurik dynasty had just died out, plunging Russia into this chaotic succession crisis known as the Time of Troubles. In 1613, a compromise was reached. A 16-year-old noble named Mikhail Romanov was elected Tsar, officially establishing the dynasty. And they consolidated power incredibly fast. By 1682, Peter the Great took the throne, completely transforming Russia into a modern, formidable European empire. Interestingly, though, by 1762, the direct male line actually died out with Empress Elizabeth. The crown passed to her nephew, Peter III, which shifted the true lineage to the House of Holstein-Gottorp. But they officially retained that powerful Romanov name to emphasize their connection to Peter the Great. Now, before we move on to their wealth, there is an eerie historical bookend that frames their entire 304-year reign. It is a chilling coincidence. When young Mikhail Romanov was offered the crown in 1613, he was actually taking refuge at the Ipatiev Monastery in Kostroma. 3 centuries later, the dynasty was violently extinguished in the basement of a completely unrelated building with the exact same name, the Ipatiev House. Section 3. The Imperial Fortune. Now, what's really interesting about this is how highly organized and institutionalized this staggering wealth was. We're not just talking about owning some palaces here. This was legally codified. The 1886 statute on the imperial family outlined exactly what members of the extended family were entitled to straight from the state treasury. For example, a Grand Duke, a son of the emperor, received 33,000 rubles a year, literally just for being born. By the time he married, his annuity skyrocketed to 200,000 rubles a year, plus a massive one-time million-ruble payout when he came of age. Daughters, they received a colossal 1 million ruble dowry upon marriage. It was a sprawling, well-oiled financial machine designed to maintain absolute royal supremacy based entirely on birthright. And keep in mind, that was just for the extended family. What about the Tsar himself? Well, according to the 1932 memoirs of Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich, Tsar Nicholas II had an estimated pre-World War I annual income of $10 to $12 million. And look at where it came from. Over half was a direct government appropriation, essentially the state directly funding the monarch. Another massive chunk, about 35%, came purely from interest on deposits kept in English and German banks. The rest came from the sheer exploitation of vast imperial estates. But wait, that was just the annual cash flow, $80 million. Let that number sink in. This was the estimated early 20th century value of the Romanov family's frozen assets. Imagine that. This wasn't real estate, this was their hoard of jewels, diamonds, and gemstones, carefully accumulated over centuries. It was an almost incalculable concentration of personal wealth. Yet, despite commanding this absolute wealth and an army of millions, the man at the very top felt completely inadequate. When his father, Alexander III, died suddenly of kidney disease in 1894, Nicholas II famously stated, "I am not ready to be Tsar." It humanizes the man, sure, but it also darkly foreshadows the impending collapse. He was a reluctant autocrat inheriting a rigid system that desperately needed reform, but he was stubbornly determined to maintain his father's harsh policies. Section 4. The Fall of the Romanovs. You see, it wasn't just one single mistake that brought them down. It was a perfect storm of crises. First, Nicholas made the disastrous decision to take direct command of the Russian military during World War I, tying himself personally to the catastrophic defeats on the front lines. Back home, the public deeply distrusted his wife, Tsarina Alexandra, because of her German origins. And behind closed doors, there was the secret tragedy of their son Alexei's hemophilia, which drove Alexandra to rely heavily on the mystic Rasputin, severely damaging the dynasty's reputation. Finally, the sheer weight of a rigid autocracy cracking under internal scandal and a horrific world war culminated in the 1917 February Revolution. Nicholas was forced to abdicate the throne. And this brilliantly illustrates how the immediate shattering aftermath scattered the dynasty across the globe. While the core family met their horrific end in Yekaterinburg, there was a wider extended family. Out of 65 living Romanov family members at the time of the revolution, 47 managed to survive by fleeing into exile. They were scattered worldwide, escaping the Red Army on British warships and refugee trains, finding new lives everywhere from Denmark and France to Canada and the United States. Section 5. The Modern Romanov Claimants. Right. So to understand the modern disputes happening today, we really need to understand the Pauline Laws. Decreed by Emperor Paul I in the 18th century, these were among the absolute strictest house laws in all of Europe. They required semi-salic primogeniture, which just means the throne passes down the male line until it goes completely extinct before ever passing to a female. Crucially, though, they also required equal birth marriages, meaning to keep your succession rights, you had to marry someone from a sovereign royal dynasty. Because the exiled family intermarried with non-royals over the last century, interpretations of those strict Pauline laws have deeply splintered the descendants today. There are three main factions we need to look at. First, Grand Duchess Maria Vladimirovna claims sole headship, arguing she's the only child of the last valid male dynast under the old laws. Conversely, Prince Karl Emmich of Leiningen is recognized by the Russian Monarchist Party. His supporters argue Maria's parents' marriage was invalid, making him the rightful heir after his conversion to Orthodoxy. Finally, there's the Romanov Family Association, currently represented by Prince Alexis Romanov. This group largely consists of male-line descendants who openly acknowledge their ancestors made unequal marriages, and they publicly state that dynastic claims shouldn't be advanced at all anymore. So, what does this all mean? We arrive at our final thought here. Today, descendants are debating the legalities of 18th century marriage laws from their living rooms in Western Europe and America. But what is the ultimate legacy? Honestly, it serves as a stark reminder of the incredibly fleeting nature of absolute power. A family that once commanded millions of gold rubles, an entire empire, and unyielding autocratic authority was completely dismantled in a matter of months. They leave behind a chilling historical warning, a trove of forensic mysteries, and an enduring global fascination.